Speaker, okay. So the next speaker is Dr. Guillaume Dannhoff. The title of the his talk is The Inside-Out Technique Tailoring Fiber Dissection for the Study of Superficial White Matter.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm really glad to have the opportunity to present to you this work that is, I think, kind of unusual at OHBM because it's fiber dissection. So I'm a French university resident, and what I'm going to be presenting is a special fiber dissection protocol that has been elaborated in Tours in order to study the superficial white matter. So I have nothing to disclose. Superficial white matter is made of a colocalization of short-range connectivity along with long fiber termination, and the challenging thing is that it's very close to the cortex. It has a lot of intermingling, a lot of crossing fibers, so it's hard to decipher using conventional fiber dissection techniques and using conventional imaging technique. So as a reminder for those of you who are not familiar with fiber dissection, the idea relies on what Klingler described in the middle of the 20th century, which is the structural effects of water molecule crystallization. It has been demonstrated since recently using electronic microscopy. And so as you can see, water molecule, when crystallizing, will space axons without disrupting them, and it ends up having a brittle aspect of the cortex and the gray matter that will easily be removed using wooden spatulas when we dissect, whereas the white matter will appear with light striations that allow us to follow preferential direction of white matter tracts. So it's very effective and convincing when we have a look at long association tracts, for example, such as the arcuate fasciculus here, arching around the Sylvian fissure. But the thing is, when we take a look at conventional fiber dissection to study the superficial white matter, it's quite disappointing because as you see here, when I remove the cortex, I end up having a kind of falsely smooth layer of U fibers, as we commonly call them. And we lose information about where exactly it goes within the cortex, and we end up initially disrupting them. As we remove the cortex, we remove a part of these fibers that are very adherent to the cortex, and we don't have many things to say about their anatomical characterization. So generally, we speak about U fibers or arcuate fibers that we can see as this smooth plane underlying the sulcus, but it's kind of an oversimplification, and we can have a much better view of things when we look at things from inside out. So, as I just showed you, this conventional approach going from the cortex towards deep white matter is quite disappointing when I want to study superficial white matter. And so we thought, why not take things backwards? And we developed this inverted dissection approach that we called inside out, because it literally is inside out. So we are starting from the deep white matter, from the coronary hiata, from the thalamic radiations, and we are going towards the cortex. And so we'll have a look at the inner aspects of the fibers we will be dissecting in successive layers until we reach the outermost layer of short white matter fibers that will underlie the cortex under the sulcus. So to show what it looks like, here is one example of a procedural dissection going towards the lateral telencephalic white matter. So at first we have the cerebral peduncle with the internal capsule going into the coronary hiata. When we go further laterally, we'll find the lenticular nucleus that is made brittle by the preparation of Klingler, so we can remove it easily. And finally, we will start dissecting the long association tracts. So here is displayed the ventral stream of the language network with the inferior retinal fasciculus, the incinate fasciculus, the IFOF, and then even more laterally we will find the arcuate fasciculus arching around the Sylvian fissure. We will go through the external capsule, then the extreme capsule, and once we have completely removed all these long association tracts, we end up with this kind of intriguing image where all the bumps you're seeing are layers of short intergiral fibers underlying sulci. So it's kind of strange to see it that way, so that you can see it a little better because it's tricky. Here are oblique view of 3D models of the same dissection process. So we start for a whole brain, we dissect conventionally to find the corpus callosum, then the coronary hiata, then we start seeing association tracts, and finally when we remove all longer association tracts, we have this image showing these bumps that are short association fibers underlying the sulci. And what's interesting, as you can see with this spinning brain, is that we preserved completely the cortex, so all sulco-gyral patterns are visible, and we can confront this sulco-gyral anatomy in real time with the fibers underlying it, which we cannot do when we are starting from the cortex. So I hope by now I've convinced you that this inside-out dissection looks good and brings some beautiful images, but it has much more to bring to the table. It has a real scientific interest because when we look at short association fibers from an inner perspective, we will have a very clear plane of dissection between longer fibers and short fibers, whereas when we are starting from the cortex, since they are very adherent to the cortex, we remove the cortex and we inevitably remove a little bit of these fibers. When we peel off long association tracts, we end up having a clear plane of dissection towards these short association tracts. And so we have these light striation that is visible that we don't have when we dissect from the outside. And we can follow the direction of these short fibers, see some obliquity, see some thickness variations, and we can dissect them almost in a fiber by fiber fashion, which is a great level of anatomical detail is accessible with this method. It, of course, has a topographic interest too, because we can see how fiber will converge into one gyrus of interest. When we're starting from the cortex, we remove the cortex, and then we kind of scrape layers of white matter. So we have a false plane that is flat of dissection, and we lose the three-dimensional information. Here, we can progressively select the fibers going towards the cortex, and so we will have several layers of fibers going into one gyrus, for example, and so we can study how fibers are colocalizing in one gyrus of interest. And of course, it can be enhanced with multimodal approaches, so it has to be confronted to imaging data, and it can even be combined with imaging data. Here is one very simple example of one brain that we dissected until we reached this outermost superficial layer of short association fibers, so interdual fibers linking adjacent gyri, and we put them in a free Tesla MRI just to do some basic morphological measures, and we could see that in the same plane of short association fibers along the sulcus, we will have some thickness variations, so it's not a straight line along the sulcus. And when we apply this to one region of interest, here is a central sulcus that have been dissected using the inside-out method. And so we end up having this plane of dissection that matches short association fibers linking the pre to the post-central gyrus, so are likely to have a sensory motor coordination wall. And first we can see them arranged in a fan-shaped manner, going towards the middle parts of the convexity. And when we dissect them in this fiber-by-fiber fashion, we can see clearly three fiber reinforcements that are appearing. And as we preserve the cortex, we can compare that with what it looks from the outside, and we can see that this fiber reinforcement actually matches some thickness variation along the border of the sulcus that has been described by some of us submerged gyri. So we can correlate these sulco-gyral pattern variations with variations of the subcortical structure anatomy. So to conclude, I hope you're now convinced that fiber dissection has some interesting insights to bring to the matter, and that dissecting from this inside-out perspective depicts neuroanatomy from an innovative point of view that is refreshing, but is also very interesting because it offers detailed anatomical characterization of these fibers that is really not possible. And compared and confronted to imaging data, to functional studies, to previous works, it can provide crucial insights into neural circuit modeling. So thank you to everyone that collaborated on this, and thank you to you for your attention. If you want to see more, I invite you to screen this little QR code so that you can display this little spinning brain on your phone to have a better understanding of this inside-out dissection. And I invite you to come and see my poster so that we can have a talk in person. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there's kind of one question. Well, I think the question is about maybe fixation or maybe in this case freezing procedure you used for this method. Do you think maybe you use widely just use Klingler method in terms of freezing procedure? Are there any kind of different protocol you apply dedicated for this approach?
We prepare the brain in the same way when we do with conventional fiber dissection. So it's an adaptation of the conventional fiber method, but it's the same for a conventional approach and from inside-out approach.
Second question from the audience is there any kind of challenge for observing or maybe identifying maybe crossing fiber area you can just see in this kind of superficial white matter area just based on Klingler dissections? Yeah,
it is actually challenging to see these crossing fibers. We end up having less crossing fiber to decipher when we dissect inside out because we see a more clearer way how they're going into the gyrus. And when we arrive to the outermost layer of superficial white matter, there is not that much fiber crossings anymore. But when we dissect from the longer tracts towards the cortex, we still have a lot of fiber crossing to decipher, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Well, I have one question. Do you think maybe in the future observation from this technique can potentially guide tractography study based on diffusion imaging?
Yes, the whole idea would be to confront it with ultra-high field resolution MRI tractography and to have quantitative and qualitative comparison of what we can see using these methods and what we can see using tractography.
Okay.
Beautiful work. I have a question about your last finding. Looks like you're reporting a gyral bias. So that's what it looked to me. So over that, what you call reinforced fibers, you were calling them, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you believe you found? You found that for some of the gyral pattern, there's more fibers getting into the gyrus?
Yeah, it seems that there are areas of fiber thickening within the gyrus that matches this fiber thickening on the outside. And it seems more to be correlated to a higher amount of fibers, maybe in key connectivist region. For example, here it seems to match areas of particular interest in the homunculus, like in the area of the hand. We have stronger fiber patterns that you see, so maybe it's areas of higher connectivity.
Is that higher connectivity sparse, or most of the gyros have that higher connectivity? Most of the crowns.
It's actually quite sparse. It's very in specific areas.
I think the time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.